Good afternoon. Hello. Welcome to this session of Audience Futures. It's so lovely to see you all arriving. Welcome. I'm really pleased to be here and excited to be talking about investing in the next generation. As we wait for more people to arrive, please say hello in the chat, introduce yourself and your work, and let us know what country you are beaming in from. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands from which you're joining us today and pay my respects to elders past and present, and a special welcome to any First Nations people joining us. I'm beaming in from Bundjalung, Arakwal country, northern New South Wales. Sunny but chilly here today. Anyone else? Um, a great day for talking about audiences and in particular children and young people. And if you're watching this on the recording, hello to you too. We haven't forgotten you. Um, Hi, Cassandra. Lovely to see you. Introduce yourself in the chat. Waiting for more people to come in. My name is Tandi Palmer-Williams. I'm an industry researcher and director of Patternmakers. I have a special interest in audience connection, community wellbeing, and yes, young people. And today I'm joined by Hayden Tonazzi. Hi, Hayden.
Hi everyone, joining here from Gadigal land. It's nice to be here with you all.
Zoe Scrogings
Hi everyone, I'm joining you from Larrakia country in the top end.
and Dr. John Nicholas Saunders.
Great to be with you, everyone. I'm joining you from Jagera and Turrbal country in Meanjin, Brisbane.
Hello, everyone on the chat. So lovely to see your voices. Jennifer, Alice, hello, Tom, Luke, Catherine, Helen. We're going to have a great chat today. Thank you so much for your interest and dedicating the time to be here. Essentially, we're here to discuss trends in the performing arts. I'm recognizing some familiar names. So some of you have joined us for the first two in the series, interpreting the trends. From the National Arts Participation Survey. So over 9,000 Australians participated in the National Arts Participation Survey in 2025. And the report was released recently by Creative Australia with plenty of insights. I think there's, 400 or 500 pages in the report, but today we're going to pick a little piece of that and talk about acting on opportunities for children and young people. So 4 weeks ago, we kicked off the series with the discussion of attendance rates, frequencies, and pricing. And then 2 weeks ago, we explored audience motivations, barriers, and programming. And today is all about children and young people. Now, you'll know that there's a lot of different facets to this topic, and to do it justice, we would need many, many days. So today's conversation will mainly focus on children and young audiences and performing arts. If you're from another art form, I'm sure you'll get a lot out of the conversation, but we do have that kind of framing. And essentially, last time we talked about mind mapping as a great way to take notes on a panel discussion. Today, I offer you this quadrant for your idea mapping. So if you're someone who wants to get the most from this conversation, you can grab a piece of paper or in your notebook, draw two axes. And on the top half, it can be for your notes on under 12s. And the bottom half can be for your 15 to 24-year-olds. The left can be for systemic or sector ideas, and the right can be for individual organisations. And I offer you this as a way to take notes, and hopefully you'll get something out of today's conversation, even if this is an area you've been working on for many years. It's got a long history. Many people on this call have been working on this topic or in around this topic for a long time. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to have a good chat and really connect on this topic today. Now, let's get to know our panel. Hayden, will you kick us off? Tell us about what you do.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Hayden Tonazzi. I'm the Artistic Director and CEO here at the Australian Theatre for Young People. I guess a little background about myself and the organisation. I'm really, honoured to be here today as I still consider myself a young person leading a youth theatre organisation at the moment. So I'm a graduate from the NIDA directing program. And yeah, have now for about 14 months been here as the artistic director of ATYP. Our organisation is 63 years old now. a very significant history with ATYP and supporting young and emerging artists and audiences over that time. Um, oh, I can see. Can we see Hayden? I hope I'm visible to
I
everyone.
can see you,
Okay,
Hayden.
great,
So
great.
perhaps, Jessica, maybe you just need to adjust your view. Apologies.
No, that's okay. And we, I guess most recently, we have an extensive history, but we are really driving a focus on producing theatre works at the moment by, with, and for young people. We really try not only tell the story of young Australians, but make sure that young and emerging artists and audiences are involved in that creation process. And at the moment, we have the beautiful Saplings by Hannah Blansky on the road, which is heading up to Darwin Festival next week. And see Kate Felder's in on the call, and Zoe's up there as well. So that's opening at Arts Centre Melbourne today as well. So it's a beautiful piece about young people in conflict with the law and justice system, and really speaks to the social impact work that we are trying to drive as an organisation.
Thanks, Hayden. So good to have you here today. And yeah, with that legacy of work at ATYP. Zoe, let's hear from you next.
Hi, I'm Zoe, the executive producer and CEO of Corrugated Iron Youth Arts, the Northern Territory's leading youth arts organisation, and I also serve as the chair of Darwin Fringe Festival. So, Corrugated Iron is quite an iconic organisation in the Territory. We've been around for 40 years and we've been creating opportunities for children and young people to engage with the arts as participants, creators, leaders, and audiences. So we work across the performing arts. So theatre is big amongst our cohorts, so is circus, creative learning and delivering programs in schools in very remote communities, often in regions that sometimes don't have access to things that even a regional community have. So we're often providing young people with sometimes a first encounter into the performing arts. A little bit about me. I guess was a young person that was a beneficiary of being engaged in youth performing arts programs, and so I've seen firsthand, I guess, the benefits as a leader in creating work with young people and also being audiences. So I guess in my career, I'm really interested in youth-led opportunities where young people are positioned as, I guess, innovators and leaders now, not just as symbols of the future.
So important. Thank you, Zoe. John, let's hear from you.
Hi, great to be with you. I'm a senior lecturer at the National School of Education at Australian Catholic University, based on the Brisbane campus. I began my career as a secondary school drama teacher, and later I worked as a head of department as Assistant Dean of Learning in schools. And I spent 7 years as Director of Education and Community Partnerships at the Sydney Theatre Company, working closely with teachers, schools, teaching artists and young people. And during that time, I was chair of the AMPAG Education Network, for those who remember AMPAG. I've also worked as a consultant to arts and cultural organisations, and I've served on a number of boards. At the moment, I'm on the boards of Australian Plays Transform, Le Boite Theatre, and Drama Australia. And I wear a couple of hats. So I think I'm also here as chair of the National Advocates for Arts Education, which is an umbrella organisation bringing together the peak professional teaching associations for the five art forms of dance, drama, media arts, music and visual arts. And I'm president of the Australian Alliance of Associations in Education. I suppose all of my work has been really about that sort of intersection of arts, education, policy, and advocacy. And I really want to keep working towards ensuring that every young person in Australia has access to quality arts education and quality arts experiences. So it's great to be with you and having this conversation.
Thank you, all three of you, for all the work that you do and for being here today. I'm going to put up a poll, or Crystal is going to help me activate the first poll, just to hear from you. In the chat, we've heard about some of the organisations and the work that you're doing, but we want to quantify that, of course. So, what best describes your work? You should see that on screen now. Are you in a venue or presenting organisation, a producing independent artist or a company, a festival or event? Are you in a cultural institution? Are you an education body or art education provider, or perhaps a teaching artist? community worker, a peak body in research, or something else. So let's get a feel for who's in the room today. And essentially, this is all about sharing ideas and insights because your experience and your observations is just as important as what any of us speaking is. So we'll wait to hear who's in the room today. I'll give it a couple more seconds and then I'll ask Crystal to close that survey. I think we're probably ready now, Crystal, and pop the results up. So we have about equal numbers of performing arts presenters and producers. That's great. Different parts of the ecology and also lots of education, community arts workers, some peak bodies, researchers. Thank you so much for all being here. It's going to be a vibrant conversation with so many different perspectives to draw upon. So our agenda. I've struggled to choose what we would talk about today, but essentially what I've done is dug into the National Arts Participation Report and pulled out some data points and charts that I think are worth discussing or, using to spark a discussion. We'll hear from the panelists about their interpretation and we want to hear from you too. So please use the chat to share what you've seen in your own work and share links to useful resources. If you have a question for the panel or for me, which I hope you will, the Q&A function is the best place for that. So please pop your questions in there and we'll come to those. All right, let's get into it. So I should mention the three topics. We'll talk about arts education first, highly valued, unevenly delivered. Then we'll go to creative learning. We'll talk about early learning and later engagement. And then we'll talk about young audiences, young creatives. And you can participate by mapping your ideas as you go, sharing your insights in the chat, using the Q&A, etc. So let's start with arts education, highly valued, unevenly delivered. So the NAPS, I'll say NAPS, it's National Arts Participation Survey, asked respondents about their support for public funding for the arts. And 3 in 5 Australians, so that's 62%, agree that the arts should receive public funding. It's a good start. And that's pretty consistent over time in 2022 and 2019. Similar levels were found. But it's probably important to know that the remainder aren't against public funding for the arts. They're mostly neutral. So 30% are neutral and only 8% strongly disagree. So the survey then asked Australians to rank their top 3 priorities for public or private investment in the arts. And arts access for children and young people came out top of the list. So that is Australians' top priority. On the screen, you can see the list of the other 6. Essentially, the second to top is free or low cost events. And that used to be the top priority, but that's changed. So between 2022 and 2025, it's dropped from 68 to 63. So ensuring children and young people have access to art and creative experiences to support learning and development is now the enduring and top priority for public investment. And essentially, we've had a question come up. What is the 38% of people who don't think children and young people are investment priority? Essentially, Australians were asked to pick their top. And so they were asked to select 3 in order of importance. So although, most Australians would be hard pressed to disagree with that, they've prioritised other things. So other public priorities are things around ensuring art supports our health and well-being, investing in the making of art, funding art in public spaces, ensuring that art pushes boundaries and drives innovation. So all of these things are important and interrelated, but this top priority is one of the things that sparked this conversation today and is coming up in a lot of other conversations at the moment. And it makes sense, doesn't it, from the perspective of all the extensive evidence that we have showing that the arts and culture positively impact children and students in terms of academic achievement, well-being and engagement. And we don't have time to go into all that evidence today. Um, but I have on screen some references if you're interested to dive into those or refresh on the literature. And a key one is the recent article from our panelists, John and Sandra Gattenhoff, which I think ended up on Channel 7 on Sunrise. Is that right, John?
Yeah, yeah, unbelievable, really, for Sunrise to be talking about arts education. But yes, it did. Yeah.
Well, we're not surprised, but it was great to see that being talked about. It's called the Poly Crisis for Arts and Creative Education, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the insights from that journal article. I've also popped on screen another resource from Creative Australia, Next Generation Now. It's an excerpt of work by Sue Giles, Simon Abrahams, and Dr. Jennifer Anderson, looking at some of the research. And then The Power of Youth Arts. Hayden, what a great report that was from ATYP and Patternmakers. Okay, it's a bit self-referential, but what we tried to do with that report was to make academic research accessible to a general audience and to make some of the insights about the mechanisms more clear. So you can Google those if you want to, and there's many others. And if you have a piece of research or evidence, perhaps from your own work or something that you have found useful, please share that in the chat so we can share amongst ourselves what is worth a read. The panelists might have some recommendations too, I'm sure. So, however, despite all of this, I think you called it overwhelming evidence in your article, John and Sandra, the arts remain undervalued and underfunded within our national education system. So, the article points out that Australia continues to see decreased provision of arts education in primary schools, declines in arts education enrolments at secondary school level, and a scaling back of creative arts degree courses in higher education. So, you can check out that article for more information about those sources. But I've popped on screen the data from the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, which indicates declining enrolments across Australia in art subjects taken in Year 12. So the number of students, there were kind of over 66,000 in 2012, and in 2022, in 2012, that was about 30% of Year 12s. And now it's fallen to around 21% or under 50,000 students. So a pretty marked drop there among both male and female identifying students, particularly in females. So that's that. Let's talk with our panel now. Zoe, access for children and young people is top of the list, now. Why now, do you think? And from your perspective in the top end, what stands out as urgent to you at the moment?
Yeah, great question. I think why now is that there's been many of us working tirelessly behind the scenes to gather the data and advocate. There's a cohort of national organisations that work in youth arts, and we're specialist youth arts organisations that have banded together to really drive home that this is really essential part of the ecosystem. I think the urgency is that if we do want to have a thriving arts sector and we want to have audiences of the future, we need to invest on the ground level right now. So I guess the urgency in the Northern Territory is very similar. We're seeing a decline in investment in children and young people in education. However, at Corrugated Iron, where our programs are in high demand, we can't keep up with the demand, in particular for our circus curriculum program. Schools are under enormous pressure. There's so many social issues, so much additional workload that teachers have to carry. So, we can work in partnerships with school to deliver that arts rich learning that is totally linked to the national curriculum, which is what we're doing at the moment in two schools. We're in schools 3 days a week, delivering in primary school linked to curriculum, having incredible outcomes around participation, engagement, community connection, and I guess increased academic performance. So the evidence is there, the urgency is there. So I guess the question is, how is the system going to keep up with what we're seeing on the ground?
Hmm. All right, we're going to get into this in a moment. Hayden, let's bring you in here because, this issue seems to be gaining traction at the moment, which, must come as a relief or vindication, maybe, after, decades of work at ATYP, many other youth arts organisations and advocates on this call. What is ATYP advocating for at the moment?
I think what's really interesting, like you say decades of work, because that's what it requires is required with young people. Like we don't see, I think the thing that we often forget is that we don't see the impact of what we're doing with young people and young audiences for decades. Someone in a workshop who's 6 years old today won't be an audience member or an active arts consumer for 15 to 20 years when they're making autonomous choices themselves. So that investment, I think what we're advocating for is the need for the pipeline to be supported and for us to have that renewed investment in these youth arts organizations like Zoe's, where we're delivering programs on the ground, assisting with all of the difficult issues that communities are facing and schools are facing today. I think there's a real advocacy piece that's happening at the moment amongst all youth arts organizations with not just the artistic value of the work that we do, but the social value, like the improvement for society on mental health, on social cohesion, on a sense of belonging in community that the arts provides. And I think there's a real there's a real momentum building in that respect. We've recently pulled back together the National Youth Arts Network, which is sort of a collection of about 18 youth arts organizations across Australia, to really focus on what is our advocacy piece at the moment. Particularly, there's a real opportunity right now with the next National Cultural Plan for us to band together around youth arts. And the number one recommendation that we've pulled together as an alliance is that there needs to be a dedicated pillar for children and young people, so that we recognize that the pipeline is essential to our arts ecology and that it takes many, many years for us to see the effect of that. So the declining rates don't surprise me because that reflects the declining funding and lack of support over the past 2 decades that have happened to the youth arts sector. And now we're all starting to see the issue and worry about it, but investment now won't be seen really for another decade or so.
Mm. Well, it seems like the Australian public agree that this is a priority right now, which is heartening. John, how can our arts and education systems better reflect this? It is important from a public investment point of view, and specifically because many of the people on this call are in arts organisations. What can we do to maintain or rebuild this access for children and young people?
For me, really looking at the survey data, that one thing that really jumped out was how highly valued arts and arts experiences and arts education is by parents, and I think we need to really leverage that. I think that's a really untapped aspect in our advocacy work. And we certainly don't need to convince the Office of the Arts and arts ministers, etc., about the value of arts education and children and young people engaging in the arts. But I do think we have a lot of work to do still within the education sector about trying to communicate the meaning and the value of arts education, and the idea really that's coming through about the public value just hasn't translated through to policy provision. I think Hayden's point about the national cultural policy is a really good one, and certainly we're advocating for a sixth pillar as well. But when we look at funding historically, even in the education portfolio, we are still seeing, even in the last budget, $5 or $6 million allocated to STEM education initiatives and nothing allocated to arts education initiatives. And so I think we have a lot of work to do still with helping the provision of arts education and arts experiences to be accessible nationally, and certainly the data that was being shared in NAPS is confirming what we have already known for decades, and that lots of other research has shown, which is that access to arts education and arts experiences is still strongly linked to socioeconomic advantage, and that wealthier parents who are earning higher incomes are more likely to have their young people engaging in out of school experiences. So there is a real piece of equity as well that I think we need to address and look at. And I think that the data that you've just mentioned, as well as the work that Sandra Gattenhoff and I have done, is showing that the situation is deteriorating and is becoming even more uneven across Australia. We're seeing a 21% decline in Year 12 arts enrolments between 2015 to 2023, and that is really demonstrating that sort of gulf between the public support and what is happening on the ground in schools. From arts organisations' perspective, I think that their work is so essential and a really important part of the ecology, working alongside schools, arts educators, and parents and families. And I think we also know now from this data is that those experiences that children and young people have with artists, with cultural institutions and arts organisations stay with them, and that they're so much more likely to engage as adults and later on in life in the arts. And so I think for me, it's really highlighting the importance of the arts organisations that are here on the call today and across Australia and the essential work that they do. But there are lots of barriers that they face and that schools and parents are facing that we need to keep looking at what are the best solutions as well. Part of that we've been talking about and called for a national inquiry into arts education because we know that lots of those barriers intersect and cross over from education and into the arts organisations. Funding is one piece of it, transport is another, access is another as well. So it is a really complex kind of piece to look at.
Okay, interesting. That sounds like a really interesting a call for a national inquiry. It'd be great if there's a link to share in the chat about how people can find out more about that call or perhaps join it. It sounds like a worthwhile conversation, when we're thinking about audience development. Well, let's hear from our participants first, because I want to hear about, essentially about your schools and education audiences that you serve. I would love to run the second poll now, Crystal, because I just want to get a little pulse check on what you're observing in your engagement with education, schools, and teachers. What barriers are you hearing about or observing around, say, teachers' confidence to lead arts-based training? The curriculum focus on literacy and numeracy priorities and explicit teaching at the moment, ticket costs for incursions or excursions, travel and transport costs, specialist art teachers. So if you could pick the top 2 to 3 challenges that you're observing in your work, I think it would be helpful just to get a little pulse check on that. And then I've got some more data to show you about early learning and the links with lifelong engagement in a moment. So those other options down the bottom were about, linking arts programs into curriculum, the assessment and reporting burden on schools and teachers just being so that capacity, I guess, the distance and logistics or a lack of equipment to host program tours on site. If something you're observing isn't on that list, please pop it in the chat. I'd love to know specifically, has anything come up in conversation lately or changed in the last 12 months for you that you think we could all learn from? And Crystal, I think that's probably long enough. Let's close and show the results. Interesting. Okay, well, you can see a pattern there. Right in the middle, we've got two items around costs. So the ticket costs and travel and transport costs. And that resonates with me. I recently spoke with a principal at the local school my kids go to, and he said that the cost of going on excursions has doubled to tripled, mainly because of the cost of the bus, which is kind of crazy, but that's where we're at. But a whole lot of issues there. Another kind of common issue with 40% of you experiencing is that specialist art teacher shortages or a lack of facilitators. And we won't have time to do justice to the workforce issues. It's all related though, isn't it? So I think it'll probably come up again, and that distance and logistics for regional or remote schools. So Fiona's pointed out something not listed, the admin burden on risk assessments and parental consent for already stretched teachers. Yes. Helen's mentioned the overcrowded curriculum. Yep. The time for extra events is pretty limited. More published plays, materials for young people, particularly middle school age bracket, to encourage them to study drama in future. And yeah, it's not just the financial cost, it's also the impact on teachers' time away from school. Very much the case. Please keep sharing your observations. I'm going to get into some more data now and essentially talk about early learning and the later engagement that we see, the connection between arts education and participation. So, in the NAPS survey, which surveyed 15-year-olds and above, I will point out, respondents were asked, were you ever taught any of the following art forms at school? And were you taught any outside of school as a child or teenager? And the results are on screen. So 75% of Australian adults, 15 plus, said yes, they have done either of those things, either being taught in school. 71% were taught an art form at school, and 43% were taught an art form outside of school. And you can see the pattern of art forms. So the light blue is those who learn at school. You can see it's quite high around music and visual arts, slightly lower with creative writing, theatre, and dance. Outside of school, it's quite common to either do music or dance, less common to do visual art, creative writing, or theatre. Now, this has an impact on our adult participation rates. So, both types of arts education, either learning at school or outside of school, are linked with higher arts participation in adulthood. So, those who had what I've got here is the arts participation rates. So the proportion of people who do these things, attend arts events, create art themselves, read books, listen to music, engage with the arts online. You can see that it's higher for every type of participation among people who were taught versus people who were not taught. And people who were taught an art form during their school age years are also more likely to recognise attitudinally the positive impacts of the arts, so 90% compared to 73%. And to value the arts, that's 96% versus 85%. So there is that strong relationship there. The next slide I'm going to show you is a little window into what the future might look like or how this is changing. So parents in the survey were asked, is your child or are any of your children currently learning any of the following art forms at school? And at first glance, you'll see that the chart looks pretty similar. We'll go back. Let's see. You can see essentially, so there's the first one and there's the second one, very similar. It's heartening to hear that 86% of parents said one or more of their children is learning an art form, either at school or outside of school. So that's higher than the 75% of adults who recall doing the same. So that's positive. 3/4 say that their child is learning an art form at school, 75%. I'm not sure what the other 25%, whether they just don't know about that or their child's missing out on those opportunities. And 46% say their child is learning an art form outside of school. And you'll see that the pattern is roughly the same. But what I did was compare the results, and the patterns outside of school are pretty similar between adults in their childhood and children today. But there are some differences. So compared with the experiences reported by adults, today's children in this survey appear less likely to be learning some art forms at school, visual arts and craft, creative writing and theatre. However, dance has increased slightly, both at school and outside of school. So it's interesting. There is a significant piece of research underway at Creative Australia to understand how children aged 2 to 15 today engage with arts and creativity, including Australian stories, art, music, and performance. So that will be out later in the year. Keep an eye out for that. For now, we've just got this little window into what adults said their children are doing. But I think it provides us with, some further food for thought, and that is let's start, I guess, with the importance of school age activities for lifelong engagement. And John, I'd love to know, you've worked as a teacher within an education team of a major performing arts organisation and in advocacy. Like, what do you think are the biggest gaps and opportunities for enabling lifelong engagement?
Look, I went back and was looking again at a really important piece of research in Australia, the theatre space research project that some people in the meeting will have been involved with. But and it was something that we used a lot when I was at Sydney Theatre Company, talking about the role of the facilitator, whether that's a parent, a guardian, a grandparent, a teacher and helping and the role that that person plays in facilitating that lifelong engagement, particularly those foundational steps across childhood and those teenage years. They're the people who are booking the trip to the theatre, facilitating that experience. They're helping prepare that young person to engage with the piece of art, and also having those important conversations on the way home with that young person, helping to understand and break down the piece of theatre or performance work that they're exploring. Uh, but what happens when that facilitator, that role is taken away, when we look at that transition point between school and post-school, and that is a really big gap and an opportunity, I think, and we need to look at what are the enablers that can support young people to continue to engage in the arts after that transition point, because it is a really critical one. At Sydney Theatre Company, we used to talk about them, those the facilitators as the sort of cultural brokers. Not just the sort of excursion organisers there. I think too, from the data that you just shared, I think it's worth flagging that what you've shared is also kind of mirroring what we're seeing with enrolment data in senior secondary school as well, and that is that there is a small decline in participation in music and visual art, but there is a really significant decline in drama, theatre, and dance. And I think that is a concern for us. You know, we're particularly talking about the performing arts today. So for theatre and dance companies, I think that is something that we really need to think about, how we're working together to address that and turn that around. I think the role of the cultural broker, the facilitator, is really important, particularly how we're enabling that lifelong engagement. I think too, we also know that the individual moments, and if you've taken a young person to the theatre for their first experience, it is an extraordinary, profound moment of wonderment. And those moments can stay with us forever. I remember my first time seeing a show at QPAC, and still very much lives in my mind. The Wizard of Oz, in case you were wondering. And I think though that it is those ongoing opportunities for cultural participation that then create the practice of ongoing participation and lifelong participation with the arts. So we're pretty good at the one-offs, and I think we need to keep in mind the journey and how there is an invitation at the end of an experience to the next experience for children and young people and their carers and facilitators.
Great point. And loyalty, I guess, comes to mind because that has come up in our past webinars, actually, is, what does loyalty look like now, given also that the change to subscription models in many venues and performing arts organizations. So, that call to reinvent loyalty might begin even earlier than we thought. I'm going to share one of the questions that's come up on the Q&A is, do you think that this is a causal influence, learning arts as a child and arts participation later in life? Or is it just say that people are interested in the arts are interested in the arts? I don't have the research about that to share right in this minute, but perhaps if you're listening and you know of a study on that, perhaps an experimental study. I understand that there are longitudinal studies, perhaps not looking at that exact question, but quite similar ones, or experimental research looking at that. So it'd be great to share in the chat. I understand that that causal factor has been shown. Obviously, there's a lot of different socioeconomic factors, but studies controlling for those other factors do exist. And if you know of them, please share them in the chat. So I'll go now, Zoe, to you, because there has been that drop, in theatre and drama in schools specifically. So I think we saw, in terms of theatre that, there's a kind of a 7% drop in schools. I think there was a slight increase of 2% in learning theatre or drama outside of schools. But so it's a, suggests maybe a possible shifting happening there, but not enough to compensate for that drop in t drama teaching in schools. I'd just be curious, Zoe, to hear some of your observations, given all that fantastic work that you've been doing in schools. What are some of your observations about the value of doing it in school versus outside of school?
Yeah, I think there's value in both, obviously, on so many levels. I think the value with partnering with schools just backs up to what everyone says. But like I mentioned before, schools are just under enormous pressure, particularly here in the NT. Equity is a huge issue that John raised. The differences in curriculum and quality of teaching is vast, and I think there is a decline in specialist drama teachers. We're seeing that in the NT. What is really difficult in the NT is so we might have a really great teacher for a year or two, and then, they are really difficult to recruit and retain. So then we'll miss a whole cohort of young people getting that education through theatre and drama. But I guess the appetite for creative learning hasn't disappeared. So, and here in the NT, there's a lot of cultural education that also takes place. So, and again, it's always in partnership. And I think that's what we're doing really well here in the NT. However, it's still difficult to get really qualified, suitably trained practitioners to do quality work. Like I mentioned before, we've got some really great programs that are directly linked to the national curriculum that are really delivering on all sorts of things: attendance, mental health, social cohesion, academic performance, engagement of those young people that might not traditionally thrive in a classroom. So that's also taking place. And we're also then engaging those young people that might not fit into school um, in our programs outside of school. So there's a nice balance there, very different groups of young people or children. But I think it's that whole school model and partnership that is definitely working here. I think it's more than just learning the arts, it's that lifelong learning, like you said. And I think of, for example, our former chair was a young creative and went and studied theatre in Melbourne and then realised that, really they were into law. So they then are a lawyer and have subsequently been that facilitator of arts experiences for children and young people to continue to go to the theatre, to continue to participate and enroll in programs. So, yeah, what we are seeing in the NT is unfortunately a decline in really great teachers in specialist art form areas.
Mm, thank you, Zoe. Yeah. There's a question that's come up in the Q&A from Tom who says, thinking specifically about the excursion challenges for schools, is there scope for more collaboration between institutions to combine offerings so that school groups can attend more than one workshop or experience in a single excursion? Are you providing more value or diversity of art forms to offset the increased transport and admin related costs? So if you've got ideas about that, please pop them in the chat. I know there are some models being trialed in Victoria around, discounted tickets to enable more young people and schools to participate. Be curious, and in a moment we'll run a poll to find out how you are reaching out to children and families. But first, I want to hear from Hayden just about this in school and outside of school kind of balance. And I'd be curious to know, in terms of the in school decline in theatre and drama teaching, what concerns you about that? And I'm curious to know from all of the ATYP programs that you run, what sorts of needs you're hearing from families at the moment.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think of all this data, which is fantastic to feed into the conversation, what's really concerning is what the voice of young people themselves in this conversation as well. And going like, what is their experience in schools of drama and the arts, and what are they taking away from that experience? And I think there's a real need for further research to sit alongside what we have here to make sure that those voices are captured. And so, like, we've recently done a survey with about 200 young people about what they are feeling is the barrier or is missing from the arts currently within the arts generally, not specifically schools. But they are, they're coming up with similar answers. Like cost is a massive barrier that they're bringing up. They want to see more opportunities. I'm just looking to research over here, more opportunities in rural areas and finding a real lack of opportunity out there, which Zoe has talked on. And just more pathways and professional opportunities to understand the value of the arts as they move on through their development as well. So I think there's a real need to include more youth voice within this conversation, which I wanted to really bring out into the conversation today. I mean, my mind's been going everywhere all, with like some of Donna's comments about creating more content for specifically for young people. I think it's a really great one, and we're seeing some exciting developments in the New South Wales curriculum, at least, with ATYP developed and commissioned new works finding their ways not only onto the HSC syllabus recently with Fangirls and Saplings, but in younger years, some of our younger content, like Shack by George Kemp, is now studied in certain areas of the syllabus. And so I think there's an exciting development that might be starting to come on with local and content developed by young and emerging playwrights coming into the school system, which is exciting. And then what else was bouncing around my brain? I mean, John Mayer Awakening was also The Wizard of Oz with Nikki Webster was another point that I just thought I'd randomly bring out. Yeah, I just think there is a real need to ask young people what is missing from these education systems because the decline is really interesting. There's an advocacy piece that's being done by Drama New South Wales at the moment about the New South Wales government. There's a music plan, a 10-year music engagement plan to fix engagement with music in schools at the moment, but that hasn't been extended to other art forms like drama, like circus, like dance. And so I think there's an interesting advocacy piece there at the moment about expanding the remit of that strategy for arts education as a whole. And I really encourage people to look at the resources that Drama New South Wales is pulling out. So yeah, I think that's where our concerns are sitting is sort of like where arts education is being looked at as a whole, as a development strategy, but also where the voices of young people are in that conversation and who's asking them what they need.
Yeah, great. I encourage if you've done some consultation or run a process with young people recently, we'll get into a little bit more about young people, young creatives in a moment. But please share that in the chat. Often research and evaluation is a great place where that happens as well. And I want to call out those working in regional communities as well. I'm in a regional area and I've been working with, my local P&C group to try and fundraise for excursions, arts programs in schools. And, there is research showing that young people in regional areas are really hungry for things to do. There's often sport cancellation. Sport is mainly the thing that's available, and often things are cancelled with bad weather, particularly in rainy territories. So I'm really struck by that. You've got that demand for those programs and not the staff to run it. So I'm curious, are there people, how are the other regional organisations tackling this? And are there models to try and meet that demand better, perhaps with fundraising? And had the honour of working with Terrapin in Tasmania a few years ago, and they're in a unique position in Tasmania. I'm not sure if Sam or anyone from Terrapin's on the call, but where they tour to so many Tasmanian schools. They reach like 70% of kids in the state through bookings, and then they have an access program to widen that to small schools and schools in socioeconomically disadvantaged parts of the state. And sponsors have come to the table to support that access program. For instance, Blundstone was, and the evaluation showed that when the tours went to schools that they haven't reached before, there were signs that the kids, were more likely to be seeing theatre for the first time. And the evaluation data show that the kids who were seeing theatre for the first time were getting even more out of it. So some real strong evidence for, the case to expand that reach, but often needing additional funding to enable that to happen. But please, if you're in a regional area, let's get, oh, hi, Laura is in the chat. Amazing. Thank you for jumping in there. If you are in a regional area, let's get the conversation going about what works. And we've touching a little bit on this in school, outside of school. So this is a moment where I want to hear from you on children and families work. So I've got a little poll. Crystal, if you can run the third poll. We're not going to talk at length about children and families programming today, but seize the moment to do a little check-in with you. What opportunities are you currently focusing on to meet this need in children and family programming? So more interactive or participatory formats, relaxed or sensory friendly performances, programming for babies, toddlers or preschools? Are you innovating with pricing models? Perhaps bilingual or multilingual programming or cross-cultural collaboration, digital or hybrid experiences alongside live performance, or perhaps digital products, content shaped by children's or families' input, partnering with specialist children's or youth arts organisations. Are you making no major changes? Perhaps just maintaining what you do is enough of a challenge, or something else. If it's something else, please pop it in the chat. We'll give you a moment. There's quite a list there, so I'll just give you a moment to respond and acknowledge some of the comments in the chat. Thank you so much, those who are commenting. Teresa mentioned in Perth approximately 2 years ago, they had 2 days of workshops and performances presented by the 4 state-funded organisations. It was called 4Arts and a huge success. It ran 2 years consecutively, but they could not get further funding to continue. Teachers and schools loved it as they had opportunities to connect with music, dance, drama and opera in one place. How good! I love that concept, and what an outrage that it can't continue. That sounds ideal. I wonder if that sort of model is being tried elsewhere, because I think for kids to be able to try and taste different experiences is so valuable. Sandra, thank you for sharing your leadership on a new ARC funded project called Uncreative Australia. Gosh, that's a frightening phrase, isn't it? And you'll be engaging perspectives of young people about the situation. That sounds fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Crystal, let's close the chat now and see, sorry, let's close the poll now and see what we've got. So I'd love to hear what you're focusing on. All right, interesting. So a big chunk, 48% of us are working on more interactive or participatory formats. Relaxed performances, programming for early years seems to be quite common, about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of us. Pricing, 31% of us are working on that. Other top areas of work are content shaped by children or families' input, and plenty partnering with specialist children's and youth arts organisations. So we'll move on in the conversation now to talk about young audiences and young creatives. And essentially, what NAPS shows us is essentially that young people are some of the most highly attending parts of the population. So, it would be easy to assume from the conversation so far that we seeing a kind of a drop in young people's attendance as adults. Not the case. They are out there, very high rates of participation. And I want to specifically mention 3 things which might be kind of surprising to you or a little bit curious. So nationally, 43% of Australians create, produce, or collaborate in the making of art. Among 15 to 24-year-olds, it's 65%. So young Australians are also the most likely ones to use digital platforms to create art. So it's 52% of them are using digital platforms, and that's compared with 35% of middle-aged people and 12% of those aged 50 and over. So some quite striking facts there. The next one I want to show you is 85% of Australians recognise the positive impacts of creative engagement. Among 15 to 24-year-olds, it's 90%. So although they may not have been getting the same opportunities in schools as perhaps other times, there is that enormously high level of recognition and valuing of creative engagement. And compared to over 50s, under 25s are more likely to agree that cultural and creative experiences allow them to connect with others. And they're more likely to agree that there are plenty of opportunities for them to get involved. Interestingly, when we look at motivations by age, we covered last week that fun and entertainment is the top motivation across the population, and it is a strong motivation for young attendees. But one of the two other motivations are higher than average among young people, and that is socially connecting and expressing themselves. So, although young people are also highly driven by fun and entertainment, the social and expression motivations are even more heightened among young people. The third one I'm popping up on screen is that 23% of Australians donate money or time to the arts. Among 15 to 24-year-olds, it's 39%. That blows my mind too, because there is a lot of conversation about how young people don't volunteer and we've got a volunteering crisis. Well, this maybe not so in the arts. So unpaid work, e.g. helping arts or community groups with arts activities, is the most common way those aged 15 to 24 donated to the arts. And it's 16% compared to 10% of those aged 25 to 49 and 4% of those aged 50 and over. So some of those facts kind of go contrary to maybe my expectations. Perhaps they're not surprising to you, but I'd love to know in the chat, is there something from your observations with young people that is, busts a bit of a myth, or perhaps goes against what we perceive? I'd love to go to our panel now and hear from you, Hayden. So, young people are highly engaged creatively and they are frequent attendees, yet many performing arts organisations consider young people a hard group to attract as audiences. Where are they going wrong?
I think it's, no, I'm at risk of sounding like a broken record, but I think the question is, where are young people incorporated into your thinking, into your environment, and into your design, right? I think I had a beautiful conversation. We're developing a new work out in Armidale at the moment, with the women's shelter in Armidale, and she was telling me a local story of a council putting on like a free movie night in the park. And it was the strategy of this event was to bring young people together with like cross generation and have a community event that brought the whole community together. But on the evening, they had all of sort of parents and grandparents inside the oval, and hardly any young people in it. In fact, they were cycling around the park for the whole evening on their bikes at the perimeter. Right? I think it's this beautiful metaphor, because then when asked why they didn't come in, no one had told them that that space was for them, right? The marketing, the advertising had gone through traditional channels for parents and grandparents and community, but not to the channels that young people are engaging in. And so I think it just comes back to design and organizational structure. And I think that's where I think ATYP for the past, 10 years or so has had a youth advisory body at its heart, which is effectively the core of all of the choices that I make as CEO at the organization. They're my second board. They tell me what I'm not doing right. And even last year, we did a big sort of redesign of the brand of the organization to see what's going to attract young people. And they were involved in every step of the way, down to like color, font, layout. I basically just have a Slack channel with them and I throw them all of my problems in the best way, because they are going to create and design with the organization the best version to attract young people. And so I think Those stats are incredible. And I'm not surprised by knowing who young people are today, but I'm also certain that those stats aren't the same for all organizations. And I think the difference there has to come down to how are you actually engaging young people in what you're doing, and does your environment invite them in? Um, yeah, I might stop there, but I could go on for a while.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing resource.
They're incredible.
I wish I had a resource like that. But I've heard that, often there's a perception that, you know, there won't be a young people wouldn't want to, participate in something like that, or, it's going to be a lot of work. But, you know, do you find it hard to recruit young people to that committee or to get
It's
them
at its
involved?
highest rate of participation of the past 10 years because we've kept opening the doors. And now we have problems of like running the committee in terms of the size of voice of opinion, and satisfying all voices. But, I think Zoe said it earlier, like, and it sort of speaks to the education and all the points today is like youth arts organizations are at almost like a ceiling of participation in terms of like all of our programs at A2YP now are sold out. We've had 3 shows premiere this year, all targeted for young people, all of which have sold out as well. Young people, when engaged correctly, want to come in and be involved. And then there is a capacity issue of our youth arts organizations across Australia being resourced effectively to deliver the programs that work. So investment and dedicated funding needs to be put towards these organizations because I think we hold the solutions.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. Those results at ATYP on sales are pretty incredible and, possibly speaks to the value of that youth input. Zoe, you're the mum of a teenager, aren't you?
I
Um,
certainly am.
and I think you mentioned, in our warm-up call for this panel that when things are youth-led, audiences are really excited, right? So, should more organizations be looking to make youth-led work? Or, does that risk duplicating the work done by specialist youth arts organizations like yourself? What do you think?
Wow, what an amazing question. Yeah, look, it's I think yes, absolutely. But it's like what Hayden is saying. The question really is how. So, youth arts practice and youth-led practice isn't simply about, you know, handing over the microphone or going, hey, sit in the boardroom. It's really inviting them right in and about sharing power. And also going on a journey where you don't know really what the outcome is going to be. So I think there's some de-egoing there in terms of, letting go and getting out of the way, but providing the resources and infrastructure there and support and mentoring. And I think partnering with organizations like ATYP or Corrugated Iron, Spaghetti Youth Circus is there as well on the chat. Hi, Alice. Partnering with organizations who have this wealth of experience and who have, young people right there at, our fingertips in terms of the work that we've been doing ongoing for years and years. And I guess those specialist youth arts organization, we really understand deeply around the expertise around participation and also safeguarding of young people. That's a huge issue there. We're all about developing and supporting those pathways and offering up opportunities for young people to really make meaningful decisions around their identity and how they see themselves. So I think absolutely more organizations should embrace that ethos. But I'd also love to see more partnerships with specialist organizations. Because I guess the strongest models aren't about duplication. They're really about kind of looking at, so, example, a major institution has definitely more infrastructure than small specialist youth arts companies. So that's something that, is important to connect to those under-resourced orgs. And youth arts bring that expertise in that engagement work with young people. And young people bring the ideas, they bring the innovation, they bring what's kind of bubbling on the ground. They bring, I don't know, the zeitgeist of the time. And I think that can be rough and raw and interesting. And that's kind of what I'm excited by. I mean, I dropped my daughter off at a gig the other day that was run by some young people called Amplify the Youth. And they're just a group of teenagers who want to put gigs on. And I dropped my child off, who's 16, at a car park next door to a wrecker's yard, and they were putting on a free barbecue, and there were about 200 kids there. I don't know how safe it was in terms of, risk management, etc. But what I saw was such energy, youth organizing, and I, was thinking, wow, some of the local venues around town would only dream of what they're doing on their own. So young people are doing this already. So how do we continue to support that energy? So yes, absolutely. Let's all work together to, you know, make more opportunities for young people, because young people, they see the gaps and they can actually get out there and do it for themselves. They sometimes don't need us. Um,
Mm.
but sometimes they do. So I think, yeah, finding the opportunity and getting
Mm.
excited by innovation and riskiness.
Mm. That's such a great example. I saw recently that Music New South Wales has put out a program about making your own backyard music tour. Um, so literally supporting, young people to like make their own tours in backyards. And like, how can we support that? How amazing. I'd love to see something similar for other performing arts. So then Ang has popped up a question, about this, Zoe, like about the fact that, are youth arts organisations partnering with larger non-youth specific organisations at the national or state level to bring some of their expertise? And what are the examples of, where that is happening, or perhaps from the panel we could hear about, what a partnership conversation might look like, or what would how would the right way to initiate something like that be? Zoe or Hayden, do you want to tackle any kind of good partnership models or conversation approaches?
So, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, oh yeah. Look, I guess, Coro, we have wonderful connections and partnerships that morph and change all the time. I think a shout out to Darwin Festival. We've been working on and off on different projects, but on a really simple level, Darwin Festival are offering us really discounted tickets. So we get to then take children and young people to a selection of shows. We get to take our younger artists to those shows. So that then inspires them. And then what we've found is that some of the shows that they've seen, they then bring those ideas back onto the floor in our workshops. So it really sparks their curiosity and, yeah, supports them to grow in really exciting ways. So I think, you can start in at that really basic ground level. And then, we've also done major collaborations with, for example, Gravity and Other Myths, where we're about to do something soon too, in a couple of weeks at Darwin Festival. So we're looking at ways to partner with, major festivals, major companies to look at those connections around where children and young people can participate in really groundbreaking ways at different levels. So very entry level, but then at that higher level where they're actually performing.
And I think to reiterate a lot of that is, I think someone's reading the chat, partnerships with cultural institutions is important. I think that sort of summarizes young people want to be treated seriously. They want their ideas to be heard. And so some of the strongest partnerships we're finding at the moment is where our largest cultural institutions are giving us the space to present their work and have their voices heard. I think we're running a really beautiful program that I'm really proud of at the moment with Saplings and just a songwriting workshop that sits alongside it. And it's giving local young people in the venues that we tour to create content that is then directly fed into the show. And so they see their own input on stage. And it's not just work that is representing young people, but it's literally their work being taken seriously on stage. And sometimes within some of the most iconic institutions in Australia, like the Opera House or, Darwin Festival or Art Centre Melbourne. So I think it's those partnerships where there is a deep engagement of involving young people and giving them the opportunity to participate.
Mm.
It sort of jumps back to some of that research about people moving towards more participatory and immersive experiences. I think young people just want to be involved.
Wow.
Absolutely. That's our
Goosebumps.
experience too. Young people want their voices heard. And the other thing too, I think you touched on it, Hayden, around being invited in
Mm,
a meaningful way. And I think sometimes I'm so surprised when young people go, oh wow, that adult actually wanted to talk to me, or
mm.
that adult wanted to hear my opinion. So when you are an adult, it might not be a new thing, but for young people, just that invitation in can make such a huge difference.
Thank you for those pointers, both of you. John, I want to come to you now because we haven't talked much about higher education, but we've seen in your article, you charted the impact of job-ready graduates on higher education opportunities. And, there's concerns about generative AI impacting creative careers and particularly the entry level careers. And yet, young adults are highly engaged as audiences and creatives. So, what are some of the ways this could go?
Yeah.
And like as arts organizations, what should we anticipate about, as this poly crisis evolves?
Look, I think we're not seeing the landscape changing anytime soon. I think that's probably the first thing that needs to be said within higher education. We've been tracking the decline of those tertiary courses. We've seen about 54 that have disappeared since 2018. And that also means that entire discipline pipelines are disappearing from city, particular city or even a particular state. That is going to have a really big impact on cultural organisations. And not only on the pipeline issue, but also on how we continue to engage young people post school. I think from the survey data, what was really interesting was that young people are creators and audience members, and the line between those two is really blurred. And that certainly mirrors quality arts curriculum and school learning as well, where students are makers, performers, and responders to artworks. And we want to ensure that that continues and that those opportunities are still there. I think too, with the generative artificial intelligence sort of conversation, I really wonder how much that is feeding into parents' perceptions about the value of arts and engagement in the arts, and that they're concerned about a dehumanizing and artless education and experience for their own children. And I think that I wonder how much that is playing into the sort of shifting parent perceptions that we're seeing at the moment. I suppose, though, the reality also is, in sitting on boards that we know that the sector, the arts sector, is really in a very difficult financial and funding landscape, and lots of organisations are having to make really tough calls about what gets continued funding and what doesn't. I think as we're seeing the Job Ready Graduate Scheme really killing the higher education sector and deleting courses that have been offered, that we're going to see a need for alternative pathways into the arts post school. And I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways from the survey data is, we have seen arts organisations take a step back from their commitment to children and young people, and I think what the data is telling us is that that is a short-term solution to a funding problem, which will have a really long-term negative impact on future audiences, and I think that is a really big concern. And so when we are seeing particularly larger arts companies walk away from children and young people, I think we need to draw attention to that and say that's not good enough, and we need to challenge that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a tricky one because the ticket buying um market for children and young people is, it exists, but other models often are needed to support programs for, schools and young people. And so I'm interested to know, I mean, hopefully we see some policy change, right? Um, but this conversation isn't about sponsorship and philanthropy, but I think that's part of it, isn't it? Because so many of these programs rely on that. And, how can we work together to raise the quality and ambition of our fundraising and partnerships and philanthropy? And I'm curious to know from the other panelists and perhaps from you participants, are there opportunities that you see to get even better at fundraising for this important area?
I think
Anyone?
it's a really
Thanks,
tricky
Hayden.
piece. I think it's a really tricky piece about how do you demonstrate impact, and I think as a sector we're getting a lot stronger at that. But there is a need to really look at the ways that we're reporting impact and how we're capturing impact. And more so, I think there's a lot of people capturing it, but how are we communicating it in an effective way? And that's where I think we get really excited about our social impact theatre work, where we can put a lot of the impact on young people on stage in a digestible way. And I think as a creative sector, we could almost get more creative about the way that we are advocating for what we need.
Interesting. Yes. Um, I'm a big advocate for, I mean, we can always be doing more research and evaluation, but also for really squeezing the juice out of the work that we have done and the amazing academic research that's available, and often not in a necessarily a user-friendly format, but, how can we be creative with that communication? There is a question here from Leslie. Apologies, it's taken us a little while to get to it. How do arts organisations who work in schools overcome issues that specifically prevent arts funding in some jurisdictions being used to deliver curriculum? If anyone wants to jump in with an answer.
I think that fundraising piece that you're talking about is really important. Um, just in the NT context, there's a Artists in Schools program that is in partnership with Arts NT and the Education Department. It's something like $90,000 that people apply for. Like it's just not, obviously, it's just not enough money. So yeah, fundraising must come into it. I think in corrugated iron space, we do joint fundraising with Ludmilla Primary School, sometimes fee for service with other schools. It's you kind of unique to the conditions of the schools that we're working in. Yeah.
I think it's a bit of, I don't know. Also feel like, I think the NAP survey is pretty clear that Australian people value arts education and value and expect children and young people to be able to engage in cultural activities. It's recognised as a human right within the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child. They have an entitlement within the Australian curriculum. So sometimes I think when we're talking about fundraising and looking at corporate partnerships or philanthropic support, I do think actually Australians expect that government should be stepping up and doing more in this space, not from the Office of the Arts or from arts, who have relatively small budgets, but from the education portfolios where they have massive budgets and are subsidising STEM education programs nationally, even though we're seeing the STEM pandemic, epidemic in being resolved. We're now seeing those problems in arts education, but we're not seeing matched funding in arts education initiatives.
So what actions, John, can we take on this advocacy on the education portfolio?
Yeah, look, I think the latest national cultural policy consultation, I think, has been really good at raising some of these issues and putting them forward. And certainly, I think lots of us are advocating for a sixth pillar within that whole of government strategy. But at a very local level, I think we can all be writing to our local MPs and CCing the Minister for Education in there, and also at a state and national level, going, this is what Australians expect. We expect our cultural institutions, small, medium, and large, to be adequately funded to be able to support children and young people's engagement. We keep hearing from ministers that there are no votes in the arts, but I think the NAPS survey data shows differently, that there are votes in the arts, and that in a time of AI and dehumanizing learning and experiences, that actually we want this much more than we've ever wanted it or needed it before.
Mm. So we've got one more poll for you today, and it's really focusing on your work with young people. Crystal, if you can activate the fourth poll. Um, so thinking about young people and young adult audiences, which of these are you currently using? Discounted or flexible pricing, youth advisory board or committee, social media influencer partnerships, peer-to-peer ambassador programs, social event formats, youth curated or youth programmed events, excuse the typo, emerging artist pathways or commissions, partnering with specialist youth arts organisations, partnering with universities or TAFEs. Oh, it's a single select. Apologies. Okay, let's make it. Which of these which is your main focus? Your top focus. Uh-oh, programming error. Sorry about that. Put put your main focus, or what you see as the most important mechanism, right now. I know it's going to be a tough choice for those of you working on multiple things. Apologies. Pop in the chat if you'd like to elaborate on anything, or you're going to miss out on voting for something that's really important to you. Crystal, you can go ahead, show the results now. Interesting. Okay. Well, we're probably getting an interesting picture here because it was a single select choice, but the most important way that you're working on at the moment for young audiences is discounted or flexible pricing. Pop in the chat if there's a specific strategy there. There's a lot of different, is it under 30 pricing? Is it pay what you can? Is it something else? And we've also seen quite a big response in terms of emerging artist pathways or commissions, and that being related to audience development. Thank you so much for responding there. In the chat, we're seeing things like youth devised work, assisting teachers with resources to support arts education, and making it free for children under 15. I also want to shout out to John's earlier comment that work for children and families in institutions. He said, I think we are also seeing that family programming sometimes attracts the most diverse audiences, particularly at large performing arts centres and major performing arts companies. I'd love to know if that echoes with your experience in your organisation. Thank you for those commenting. Kania saying, working with secondary schools to customised art experiences for students and matching grant opportunities where you can. Sarah has shared free subsidised programs and education resources. So to finish up, essentially what I'd like to do is ask you to share what's one idea that has stood out to you. If you've been doing the idea mapping, I have some suggestions. You can take 5 minutes now or tomorrow over a coffee to review what's come up in your notes, and look at any ideas that might be actionable for you or your organisation. And perhaps there's something in the chat that you'd like to do. I will note that there is an option to save the webinar chat if you'd like to do that. You can click the three little dots and click save chat. It's a little trick I learned recently. Some other suggestions, if you've been mind mapping, are using visual signifiers. So you can go through and mark anything actionable with a little box that you could then tick later, or an asterisk, or use a highlighter. Potentially converting passive notes into active tasks and thinking about, what an action might look like for you, whether it's to dive into one of the resources shared or follow up with someone on this chat for more info about what they have been doing. And a suggestion, pin it above your desk and come back to it, or let the ideas percolate in your conversations in the coming weeks. I'd love to know if there's one thing that really stands out for you from this. I'm seeing the three dots in the little webinar chat, Jessica. Let me know if anyone else can see those. But yeah, what's one thing that stood out to you from the conversation? Thank you so much for all your participation. I'm going to finish with asking our panelists about what inspires you about your work with children and young people at the moment? What keeps you going? Zoe, what do you think?
Well, the thing that excites me most is that young people are active contributors to making culture now. They are the innovators, and I want to hear more from them. So that sparks me every day.
Love it. John, what about you?
Totally agree, Zoe. I think it's the transformative power of the arts that they have on children and young people, and the work that I see teachers, artists, teaching artists, arts organisations, parents and carers doing day in and day out. It's really hard at the moment. I think in every sector, but the huge transformative benefits academically, socially, well-being, sense of purpose, and empathy. I think we can't underestimate, and I find it so inspiring.
Hayden, what about you?
I think at the moment it's seeing what happens when we give young people the responsibility that they're asking for and seeing them succeed in that. Like at the moment, we've got Saplings on the Road, and there's 6 young artists, all who are under 30, delivering a national tour of a piece that advocates on a national issue of the law and justice system. And I'm like, that's 6 people under 30 delivering something that doesn't seem what people would assume young people can achieve, but they're doing it fine, and venues are loving it, audiences are loving it. So I think it's that what the opportunity that exists to give young people responsibility to fix what they want to fix or achieve what they want to achieve.
How inspiring. If you missed the previous sessions in the Audience Futures series, the recordings of those are available on the Creative Australia website. So if you're looking at understanding arts attendance patterns, the first webinar I highly recommend, and navigating audience motivation. So really digging into those attitudinal beliefs, really interesting. Thank you so much to Creative Australia for creating this space for us to discuss. I see it as such an amazing opportunity. It's been an honor to host them for you. Thank you so much. And it's great to just extend the research process in this way through discussion and sharing as a sector. I think it's so vital. And thank you for showing your support by attending these. And I hope we can keep the conversation going, particularly on this issue, which has so much momentum at the moment. Thank you, Zoe, for coming and sharing. Thank you, Hayden. Thank you, John, for your incredible work. You're all inspirations, and please keep going for the children. Bye, everyone. See you next time.